Hello, everybody out there. Let's make sure we don't have the same issue as last time. I just want to verify, see my eyes looking downward here, that we actually had people be able to access this event. And it looks like, yay, people have been able to access it. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a special presentation today from Dani Bethea, and I've been pronouncing the name totally wrong this whole time and just learned to pronounce it properly. So full disclosure, I'll pretend I knew that the whole time. Dani is just somebody who I met through Ashley Blackwell in the process of putting this festival together. And we were going back and forth with, what would be a good subject to explore, because Dani has so many fascinating pieces that you can read. If you haven't, we have them in our Discord as well. And it was so hard to sort of narrow down where we could go because there's so many places. And we started thinking about media literacy and just at sort of the base point of understanding how to read a film and watch a film and look at it critically, and starting from that point. And that's where we decided that that would be a great subject for Dani to create a presentation. So without further ado, I present to you Dani Bethea. I am Annie Mehmet, and I'm...
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much, Hannah. That introduction was absolutely lovely, and I'm delighted for everyone who is able to attend in person today, and for those of you who will be watching after the fact. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity from Axe Wound, and I am just absolutely kind of enamored with Ashley Blackwell and all of the different opportunities that she's been able to extend to so many people in the horror community. I'm forever grateful to her and just her presence in the horror space at large. And greetings to everyone who's in the chat. Feel free to clickety-clack during this presentation. I'll make sure to leave time for Q&A if you have questions for me. I'll make sure to leave some time for that, but without further ado, let's jump into this presentation. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. All right, we're going to share. We are going to get a full screen here. All right, I hope everyone can see this presentation. So greetings, everyone, and thank you to everyone in attendance. Before I get started with this analysis of horror, I will preface this with a content/trigger warning. This presentation includes discussions of ableism, death, homophobia, mental health, racism, sexual assault, and transphobia. I would also like to take a moment of silence to honor those we have lost during this ongoing pandemic. Their lives mattered, and those who are still battling long COVID, I see you and I pray for your long-term recovery. And for those this past weekend who were greatly affected by the tornadoes that touched down across the United States, I am so very, very sorry to hear about all of your circumstances, and I pray for all of the families down there. So let us begin with horror media studies with me, and let's start dissecting some of my favorite pieces. Horror in its purest form is about confronting darkness in all of its myriad of disguises. Moreover, we also understand that horror's greatest staying power is its ability to transform and mold itself to any and all of our greatest fears. We also know that horror is psychoanalytic. It operates in the space of delving into the chaotic natures of our very being. Horror is also an opportunity to engage socially with one another and bridge gaps between innumerable communities. Horror is and always has been political for the marginalized. Horror has indeed enmeshed itself into the culture. Thus, let us begin with a film that blends the psychoanalytic, the social, the political, and the cultural with none other than Jacob's Ladder. Now, I don't recall the very first time I saw Jacob's Ladder, but I most certainly recall how it made me feel. The film affirmed that there's always been an uneasiness or an uncertainty about life and what that truly means. For many, this film tapped into the feeling of disconnection from reality or being unmoored from your own body. 30 years later, and many of us, myself included, have reflected on this film and hailed it an introspective masterpiece. But why? The setting of Jacob's Ladder is eerily familiar and resonant, where a country on the brink of rending itself apart has millions of young people that have a feeling of doom and foreshortened future. Every day feels like it could be our last. On battlefields abroad, where you feel like a pawn for higher militaristic powers, or at home, where we are constantly fighting for civil rights. Many wars feel like they are never ending and have become etched into our culture. Perhaps it's more appropriate to say our DNA, because we most certainly carry the weight of our experiences and pass it along to the generations that follow. The film's central underpinning delves into discussions of mortality, existential quandaries about what constitutes a life well lived, and a cavalcade more as the character must come to grips with the fact that they are dead and or dying. There are familiar and haunting refrains sprinkled throughout that pose similar queries that fill our lives with angst on the daily. When I was alive, did I live well? Did I have people around that cared for me? And do I feel at peace to transition into another state of being? Everyone is navigating this thing called life in their own respective ways, and how we meet the end of it is always on the forefront or the periphery of our subconscious. The extended metaphor of the film's allegories to a ladder beyond the psychotropic drug is a beautiful one of descension or ascension. And akin to life, it's a process where we have to learn to traverse it, hand over hand, one foot in front of the other. But what if we never ascended from the other underground, but remained trapped by powers that never wish for us to be free and remain cogs in the perpetual machine of scientific progress? This is where Jordan Peele's second 2019 film entitled Us begins and ends, with a reflection on privilege and duality. How you could have taken me with you, Red wistfully states to the Adelaide that has taken over her life. All that you have and all that you are, all that you've become, you've taken from me. You inspired me to rebel, with others maligned and disposed of. We are tethered no longer. It's our time now, our time up there. As each grew older and in a separate environment, what was suppressed to embody the lie? The creepy and malicious grin alludes that the child from below planned to usurp the one from above and camouflage into society, not with any megalomaniacal plans of world domination in tow, but with the individual yearnings of a normal humane life for herself. Conversely, the inquisitive, albeit frightened girl from above, chained to the world below, saw the plight of the tethered, who were left to destroy themselves and each other, but saw the collective yearnings of a normal humane life within them all. Sadly, Adelaide never looked back. If she had, she would have seen hunger and the harbingers of doom on the horizon. Now the entire world is seeing red. There is an acknowledgement of imposter syndrome in the very foundation of the us premise. Red is Adelaide and Adelaide is red. The accomplishments and failures of one could not be attained without the other. The ideation of doppelgangers originally entailed the ghost or paranormal that haunted the individual with bad luck. The word itself translates into double goer or double walker and entwines with other variants of folklore with the concept of an evil twin. Jordan Peele embraced the horrific nature of this concept directly from the 21st episode of Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone, entitled Mirror Image. Therein, a young woman comes to a bus terminal and experiences the supernatural. No further spoilers, but it's an episode I highly recommend just for the unsettling premise alone. The additional import of this film is that in the 150 plus years of film history, Black women's roles in horror were very slim and rarely varied from subservient to disposable or abject monstrosity, with a few positive rare examples sprinkled in across the 1970s. However, the 90s and early 2000s most certainly saw a significant upswing of multidimensional Black women characters such as Sanaa Lathan in Aliens vs. Predator, Naomi Harris in 28 Days Later, and Inbashe Wright in Blade, and Jada Pinkett Smith in Demon Knight. This trend began to wane once again in the latter 2000s and has only begun to pick up steam in the 2010s and 2020s going forward. Thus, the trifecta of Lupita Nyong'o as the lead actor with the main narrative focus, the role of antagonist and protagonist, and audience surrogate was revolutionary and is still sadly anomalous, but hopefully not for long. With this egregious oversight of Black women's contributions to horror, we must also acknowledge, as fans of the genre, that it has not always been kind to women overall. Many of these narratives unalive women, abuse them, torture them, or turn them into manifestations of revenge. For example, Ju-on the Grudge delves into a societal pandemic. There is no singular prescription or penicillin that can quell the ravages of this particularly man-made outbreak. Director Takashi Shimizu held a mirror onto the face of polite society and revealed that when decency de-escalates, the brutality of femicide, misogyny, and patriarchy combine to form the ghosts of domestic violence. The locale of Japan's setting and customs does not dilute the salience of its images or the universality of its horrors. For a brief synopsis, an enraged husband who believes his wife has had an affair murders her, their son, and the family cat, and by proxy damns he and his family to Ju-on, or a curse grudge. The curse exists in the place where the person has died, leaving behind a residual haunting, wherein those killed manifest as ghosts and, similar to a virus, perpetually kill those that come in contact with them. If seen, the ghosts will not yield. There is no rest for those cursed via Ju-on. There is no promise of a peaceful afterlife. There is no freedom from their ghoulish existence. There's only one certainty for them now as the grimmest reapers of death. The ghosts of Ju-on are rendered in graphic, violent, and nightmarish detail to magnify the horrors that they experienced in life. The pallor of the ghosts in Ju-on are always ghastly white, with a stare that will chill the blood in your veins, with disjointed movements that only the dead can reproduce. The mother always announces her presence with a garbled death rattle, whereas her son's voice has been replaced with the disembodied caterwaul of the slain family pet. The beauty and abject horror of Ju-on is its refusal to omit any of the ugliness of death, especially when it is meted out by violence and anger. My great hope is that through media storytelling and various forms of it, the great dangers of silence surrounding domestic violence and femicide are exposed, and the vile repugnance of its existence is brought forth from the shadows. My greatest fascination as a writer is how terror can be crafted from the ordinary nature of domestic spaces that we use for our safety and shelter, that in turn can become haunted places. So then, what do we make of the haunted image? Of the horrific moment of a woman's violation frozen in time? Why would the dead return to the living world without a message to convey? Uniquely, a powerfully resonant film from decades ago in Thailand is situated as a reverberating time capsule that situates the current Me Too movement and the ghost of its silenced victims as intertwined. The two directors of Shudder, Bong Joon Pisantonkun and Park Pum-wangpung, along with third writer Sopon Sukdapitsik, explored the specters of guilt and lies unacknowledged, all coupled with the prevalence of violence against women. Violence is often, in fact, abundantly wielded against women in very particular ways. Emotional, monetary, and/or sexual abuse are the cudgels that are regularly swung to keep women quiet, subdued, or under control. Photographs are utilized in the film to capture the moments of trauma surrounding a violent physical and sexual assault against a woman with the intent to shame and terrorize. By weaponizing the photographic image, there's an intent to lock an individual into a particular place and time of trauma. The film is explicit in the messaging that sexual violence is a morally reprehensible crime and utilizes a paranormal allegory to illustrate that your victims are not ghosts and that you will perpetually carry the physical weight of your misdeeds. One of the most iconic stills from Shudder is the ghost of the woman sitting upon her former boyfriend's shoulders with his neck forever bent downward in shame. The creators of this film crafted its horrors from a Southeast Asian Thai perspective, but the film is worthy of global reflection because the messages it crafts are present in every nation, where women face assault based on their sex and a culture of being sexualized. The weight of this decades-old film juxtaposed with the current Me Too era, wherein very little has changed socially or politically, is a heavy load to bear. I personally like a good revenge horror story, but many in horror's past made women ghosts, hell-bent on revenge beyond the grave. So what of the living victims? No, survivors. 2020's Invisible Man had a response. The film, directed by Lee Wanell, infused the technology and terror of our current time to paint a reality of domestic violence that many are intimately familiar with. Herein, surveillance is the horror of our modern age. Our laptops, smartphones, and tablets are a window for anyone to peer in and spy on our data, know our location, or steal our identity. Imagine if your abuser was technologically proficient enough to manipulate themselves and cloak themselves in digital and physical invisibility. The film is also a masterclass in digital anxiety. Every moment is brimming with tension because the danger is a threat unseen and the camera is utilized superbly to illustrate that the lead character is never alone. The usage of the reflective tech suit for concealment is just the cherry on top of this horrifying sundae. Invisible Man also tackles a new frontier that showcases a frightening future for gaslighting, stalking, and online harassment. Throughout the home space, there's surveillance equipment, motion sensors, alarms, keypad access locks, and more to keep his victim constantly under scrutiny. She eventually turns the tables on him and utilizes the same technology to end his reign of terror. Prior to this, she only uses her wits, intuition, and savvy to escape or fight him. When she realizes that he's willing to harm or kill other people just to keep her, she understands what must be done. Bravely sitting down with the film's monster, she looks him in the face and tries to find any redeeming qualities. Finding none, she does what many women have done in real domestic violence cases and kills her abuser. As she walks away from him, she's remorseless. And as the end credits begin to roll, she exhales for the very first time. One of the most powerful aspects of this film is our changing cultural awareness surrounding domestic violence and abuse. This is a beautifully transformative time in our collective societal empathy because with or without his technology, we could all see the invisible man. Revisiting the seed that I planted a couple of slides back about the lack of diversity for Black women in the genre, which seems to start and stop with varying degrees of success, we must also discuss the stories we have missed out on, the stories that were relegated to Blaxploitation instead of universal box office potential, and the stories that Black auteurs scramble to make while the window of opportunity lasts. A through line and consistent underpinning in many of my dissections of the genre is the quagmire of race and horror. Particular intricacies always exist in the stories and lives of Black people, especially in the framing of horror imagery. While horror films regularly have to contend with the consequences of being situated in a Black and white world, oftentimes the lines get blurred between the science fiction and horror genres. For this reason, the threat for Black people in a film can be quadrupled via human monsters, the supernatural, or an alien creature from another world. Frequently, the horror genre has framed these films through a white lens, with a predominantly white cast and with a focus on white terror. It's crucial when viewing benchmark horror films that one unpacks what the films are directly or indirectly implying are the threats to white lives and white safety. The existence of horror icons like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and many more barely compare to the tip of the iceberg of horrors that Black people experience even before their first cup of morning coffee. Scrolling through your smartphone daily is anxiety inducing and like spinning a roulette wheel that will constantly land on the bleakest glimpses of Black life or death. The regular and reoccurring graphic acts of violence and brutalities against Black bodies are in high definition quality for the world to see. I would be remiss if I didn't discuss how gender, and for some of us, gender presentation, has always played a role in the types of violence and horror that we experience in film and online. The danger of intracommunal and intercommunal violence has never diminished. Increasingly, the threat of violence escalates if you are within a non-heterosexual or cis male group. The numbers of Black trans women and/or gender nonconforming Black people that have been attacked or murdered has frighteningly skyrocketed within the past decade, with numbers outticking the last every year. Trans Black women, cis Black women, and girls face a heightened threat that is frequently coupled with domestic or state sanctioned violence. So always keep in mind in your favorite mediums, how does race and horror intersect? When vulnerable races slash ethnic groups are in peril, how does the film give characters agency or empowerment? Are your favorite horror films intersectional? And are they doing something radical, like Jordan Peele's Get Out? Get Out certainly deserves its revolutionary status. Its callbacks to the old hearkened upon something new and ultimately timeless. Its explorations of what makes the horror genre profound from a Black perspective were tasked in looking for the truth and ugliness of white supremacy and racism, and through that unmooring the profundity of Black survival. With imagery that harkened back to grave robberies and its impact on Black burial rites to the frightening overlap of night doctors and resurrection men, the film continued to reveal layer after layer of ruminations on the past and therefore ripple effects into the present. Without removing the ramifications of American chattel slavery, failed Reconstruction, and Jim Crow from the narrative, Get Out became an opportunity to glimpse Black life and horror in the present. The film's masterful unveiling of danger intermixed with critiques of liberalism made for an experience like no other, and represented a door that once opened could never be closed again in horror cinema. Speaking of past and present horror iconography, the towering silhouette of Gojira has forever been imprinted on our cultural imagination. With almost 70 years in some form stretched across the cinematic landscape, nothing comes close to the debut of this icon etched from the landscape of a nuclear world war. Tomonuki Tanaka, a World War II survivor and the creator of Gojira's iconic likeness, states that Gojira is the son of the atomic bomb. He is a nightmare created out of the darkness of the human soul. He is the sacred beast of the apocalypse. Directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi in 1954, the story explores the futility of war against each other, especially nature, and how images of horror are transmitted and translated for generations to come. Its sequel or reimagining entitled Shin Gojira explores many of the same themes, including the limited progress and mankind's contemplation about its place in the universe. Gojira is very important to me, as it was one of my first forays into the environmental horror genre, and cemented why the character continues to loom large for lovers of history and science fiction. They represent the past, the present, and the future of nuclear war, radioactive fallout, environmental disaster, climate change, and depleted resources heralding our collective demise. This is why Gojira continues to trudge back into the pop cultural consciousness as an icon, because they embody the cyclical mutations of human blight. We are the walking pestilence. We are the terror of the skies, land, and seas. We are the end. We have been unmasked, and Gojira is our face. If you'd like to hear more of my contemplations about the totality of Gojira's impact and presence in the horror canon, be sure to also check out the Beauty of Horror podcast, coming soon to a headphone near you. Continuing onward with the study of eco horror, we must also make space for our continued interest in the narrative of plagues. COVID-19 has once again exposed our social anxiety surrounding disease and the harsh reality that a global pandemic is truly and unfathomably wretched. One of the tentpoles of the horror genre is the fear of viral infection, the unseen bacterium, and the rampant spread of disease. COVID-19 is the pandemic of our time that insidiously appears symptomatically to the common cold, but it spread to hundreds of countries and killed millions of people. Quarantine zones and fever checks have become commonplace. City streets and gathering places ebb and flow with precautionary measures. The serious acknowledgement of transmission of the sickness has caused severe economic anxiety, escalation in xenophobia, and direct questioning of our social security. This event is putting leadership to the test, and many have responded successfully or failed spectacularly. Without access to healthcare, testing kits, and the ability to stay home to self quarantine, many are marching headlong into an unknown probability of illness. The Walking Dead and The Thing are examples of the monster being us or assuming our form. In Alien, we are merely a vessel for the terror to incubate. Even demon possession films are not immune to contagion allegories. They are entities whose main task is to infiltrate the human populace and spread traumatic energy. There is fear in these stories that we are defenseless or become irreversibly weakened by the presence of the infection, and that those who are affected must be quarantined or neutralized. Throughout these films, the virus is transmitted through saliva or blood. The variant of transference rarely differs, and this makes human beings especially vulnerable. We sneeze and cough everywhere, and the locations where we are in contact with blood are incalculable. The Resident Evil video game series and films explore biological agents that are spread throughout cities as bioweapons. The unsuspecting populace is never the wiser until it is too late. The prescience of horror films is that they're constantly pontificating on the eventuality of an apocalyptic event and the preparedness of the global community. Recent films such as It Follows downsize the scale of the infection to the young, sexually active, and suburban. The deepest collective anxiety about viral events is time. We are merely biding time until the virus comes into our schools, into our places of leisure, and into our homes. Some type of virus in our lifetime will find us and get us, and there's no amount of hand sanitizer in the world that can keep that from happening. Regardless of who we try to keep out, the plague will always find a way to slip through. This terror cannot be dispatched with a flamethrower, magic spell, or a bullet. It is microscopic, and our means to control it are regularly futile until we create an antidote. Until then, it has control over us. During this time of potential panic, I pray that we can remain calm, but leery of the dangers that Delta and now Omicron present to us. We must dismantle disinformation and elevate knowledge. So let's remember to wear our masks, think wisely before going into crowded areas or packed events, wash your hands, don't touch your face, stay hydrated, eat and sleep well, be careful of the surfaces you touch, do not bite your fingernails, sanitize as needed, and practice proper hygiene. Pandemic or no pandemic, your immune system will thank you. In our inexorable musings of doom and gloom, we must think of the children. What horror media properties do they have to sate their ravenous appetites? Well, today I will keep the short list to two, which I'm also going to recommend for all ages. First, I must profess the time investments that I personally made into religiously following The Owl House on Disney Channel would probably make some person scoff, but I can't applaud the show enough. It is incredibly good. The humor is on point. The animation is impeccable in every episode. The show is queer as heck, and the two leads are also a couple. The talent is just off the charts regarding the show, and I cannot sing its praises enough. And the comedy to horror elements are always finely tuned. Similarly, the show Victor and Valentino, which is currently airing on Cartoon Network, is an absolute blast. The blending of horror and history is also phantasmagorical and colorful, with both shows showcasing characters from the Latinx diaspora. The primary difference in both programs is the setting, which shows Victor and Valentino's world being somewhere ambiguously Latin American. Since the show's premiere, there have been an abundance of stories, legends, and folklore that the show has beautifully unraveled. The characters are all engaging, handsomely rendered, and the horror designs are all top tier. Akin to the Owl House, both programs have the element that I absolutely love in regards to the unknown, or creepy things which aren't necessarily to be feared but respected. It's the human monsters that you need to be leery of. The young people have amazing content too, that you should really binge watch in your spare time, especially because the shows are serialized. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea with animation because sometimes it's nice to have bookends or just to have a recurring character for giggles and background recognition. But I'm going to advise giving these shows a chance for that reason, because the writers and animators are completely aware that everyone is watching their content and realize they need to deliver an A+ product. So, to conclude this light presentation on a semi lighthearted note, sometimes I just like to write for the fun and lightheartedness of the genre we've all entrenched ourselves in. For example, horror is so multifaceted, and collecting memorabilia from it is just another exciting part of the experience that also represents another way to broadcast to other horror lovers. So, our collections of VHS tapes, DVDs, Blu rays, and edition XYZs surely know no bounds. So don't even get me started on the figurines or the clothing items we have all meticulously organized. Being a horror fan is truly a bountiful labor of love. So, to conclude, I just want to wrap this up with how my process works whenever I start to delve into some of my favorite pieces of horror media. So, classic questions are phenomenal springboards for writing your horror pieces. So, who, what, when, where, why, and how. These are things that are taught to us from a very early, young writing age, but they hold true for me, especially when I'm breaking and dissecting horror and really trying to unpack some of its really varied elements, such as history or its particular place in time, or what were the social or the political politics going on at the time. And a great example of that is in the horror noir documentary, which is currently airing on Shudder. Next, we need to think about whose voice has been unexplored or unvocalized in the horror genre, something that I touched upon quite a few times throughout my presentation. So, who hasn't been given their full due in the horror genre still? Whether that be from a sex standpoint, race, gender, identity, location, so on and so forth. There are so many stones left unturned in the horror genre that we really just need to kind of key in on these things whenever we're talking about some of our favorite pieces of horror media, and who's kind of still in 2021 being left out from that. So who's being failed by horror narratives, right? Is it the gay best friend trope, right? Is it the black best friend dies first, or all of these different tropes that we've really tried to stop, writing and or told our favorite directors and writers to stop doing, right? So we need to think about whose voice, story, and creative talents are clawing to get out. So this is an example in a piece that I wrote for cinéSPEAK entitled Contending with the Scraps, the Fight for Direction of Black Women's Horror Narratives, that focus primarily on director Nia DaCosta, and this being her second feature film debut with Candyman 2021. No spoilers. There will be no discussion of that today. If you'd like to delve into all of those pieces, they are in my social medias. So I know I could fill an entire presentation talking about them, but it's so new, I didn't want to delve into any spoilers. So we'll just move right along. It would also behoove everyone to dabble in the subgenres and how the medium itself is made. So, for example, the artistic process, sound design, costuming, special effects, aka all of that stuff behind the scenes that, makes the film kind of run smoothly, right? Some of our favorite films would not be the same without lighting, right? Without particular types of key, sound design people or people who do our favorite costumes, right? Just an example of that is just back here that you can see. It's called Unwrapping the Weeknd's Bloody After Hours. Now, the Weeknd, if you're not familiar with his work, recently he had a album that released called The After Hours, that was a an incredible showcase of all of his kind of horror references and even some things that people didn't know that he was really into. Every Halloween season, he really does a phenomenal Halloween costume of some kind, but this album and its adjoining music videos were incredible pieces of just like horror cinema that I was really blown away by, that I think everyone should really kind of jump into sometime if they have an opportunity. So we also need to form a solid cachet of knowledge about the genre, right? There's so much to explore beyond just the film, right? There are podcasts, documentaries, interviews, film commentaries, academic or non-academic literature, and all kinds of things in between, betwixt in between, right? That we kind of utilize, especially as we're writing our pieces, or even let's say if we're filmmakers, that give us further insights about how to really stretch this genre to its fullest and most amazing potential. And, you know, I think it's imperative that everybody kind of does some of these things from time to time, because it will really give everyone an appreciation into the deeper aspects of the genre that we all know and love. So also, let's not be afraid to bridge the gaps between mediums. I know some of us are only horror film people. Some of us are only horror video game people. Some of us only read our favorite horror novels, or you know, television or whatever. But I think it would behoove everyone if we start to bridge those genres. So some of your favorite horror directors are also some of the like nerdiest video game people on the planet. So it would behoove everyone to see like, well, what's going on in video game horror land right now, or even past video game material, right? What's going on in like, you know, horror manga, right? Or animation or anime or television. I mean, the medium is so large and expansive that I think, you know, we sometimes do ourselves a disservice if we kind of cut ourselves off from just, you know, one genre and don't explore the full breadth of what's out there. So if you can kind of see the background there, I talked about one of my favorite iconic characters from this year, which was Alcina Dimitrescu from the Resident Evil Village video game series, who took the internet by storm. People who are not even into video games somehow found out about this tall vampire lady, and the internet exploded and broke for like a couple months. And it was actually really beautiful to see that we all came together because of our love for this character. So it's just really sweet, and it still tickles me to this day. Also, here's some side notes, right? It is okay to wait to write your piece. Okay, sometimes the best thing is actually to wait, or to let your mind kind of process what you've just seen, especially if it's a new film, right? And you may have a hot take, you know, about the film, but sometimes it's good to kind of wait, let your brain kind of settle a little bit, and then kind of go from there. Or if you have a handy dandy notebook, if you're proficient at it while the film is ongoing, take your handy dandy pen or pencil, write some notes while the film is going on, or something like that. So when you flip through it afterward, you have all of those things ready to go when you get ready to write your piece. So waiting is not only okay, it's the most beneficial part of the writing process. But like I mentioned, if you have an idea, a title, or a thought stream about what your piece is going to be about, absolutely write it down. So for example, I saw Candyman, the newest one, on opening day, but I actually took some time and stayed away from all of the other reviews, because I wanted my review to be my review and my opinions to be my opinions. So sometimes it's good to just kind of shut off all social medias, turn off your phone, don't scroll through Twitter or Instagram or Google or anything else, so that your piece can be your own, and you won't potentially be influenced positively or negatively in one direction when you start your writing process. Right. So also, before you write, please please check to see who's written about the subject prior to, and make sure that you are not retreading familiar territory, aka no copy and pasting. So this is something I've run into sometimes, obviously, because some horror films, obviously, as we know, are what, decades old, right? Many films in the genre are just rife for having 5,253,658 pieces written about them, right? But sometimes what's really neat is because you're you as an individual, you can find an avenue that none of those other pieces have navigated before. And that's what's really cool about being you as an individual, that nobody has your voice, nobody has your skill, nobody has your talent or your eye for horror like you do. So make sure, like I said, please see who's written about the subject prior to, so you aren't retreading familiar territory. Check, double and triple check, you know. So Google and search engines can be your friend in this regard, or if you aren't sure, check with your horror circles, your academics, some of your fellow journalists, some horror magazines. Kind of just search out there and see who's written about the topic prior to, and see what they've written, and see if it's going to potentially overlap or mesh into what you're potentially going to write about. Now, here's the next thing. Here's the very, very next thing that I have intimately talked with some of my favorite horror people about. Please do not plagiarize, right? And always give credit. I'll say that again. Please do not plagiarize and always give credit. Now, this is something I would think that at our adult ages, we wouldn't have to deal with, but it is something that we still have to deal with just as writers and just as people who are on the internet, and you know, our pieces are public pretty frequently and aren't behind a lot of paywalls, so it can make it such that someone can see something brilliant that you've written and, you know, write the same thing and be at a bigger platform and plagiarize and not give you credit. So I'm just going to say that please don't do that. Please don't, please don't, please don't. It will always get back to the person eventually that you have potentially stolen from. And I don't want that to be what's going on in the horror community, the horror writing community, like at all. So I guess the same thing goes with horror novels and films. Sometimes people can see like, wait a minute, that was my idea, or some such. Please, let's not do that. Let's let our own ideas be our own, and let's give credit where credit is due. Okay, whether that be verbal credit, a tag, monetary, right? So something is most certainly better than nothing. So let's not plagiarize, and let's always give credit. So I thank you all so very much for attending. I hope you all enjoyed my little short forays into some of my favorite horror pieces that I've written about. You can find more of my work on my Medium page. You can just also follow my Twitter at the Dani Bethea, and it should, you know, kind of lead you to all of my creative links and outlets. Again, a sincere thank you to Hannah, Ashley, and the entire Axe Wound Film Festival staff for this amazing opportunity to kind of just shoot the breeze about horror and my love for the genre. And I thank every single person who watched. I love you all, and I appreciate you, everyone who tuned in. I'm not actually sure who's in the room or who will be in attendance post that fact, but I would love to take some questions from you all. I'm going to close and stop my screen sharing. So if everyone is just like, what's happening? This is what's happening. I'm stopping the screen share, and I am joining Hannah on the left. Okay, I don't hear Hannah. I think she's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
There we go. That was absolutely fantastic, Dani. Thank you.
Oh,
That was
thank you. I was
absolutely.
like, I felt like I was sprinting through.
You did brilliant. And we've had people commenting. I'll make sure you have access to see the comments. Lots of praise for what you did. If anybody who is watching wants to, there's two options before we end. If you want to say something to Dani directly on video, we can patch you through to ask a question or comment, or you can type a question in the Q&A with a hand raised and type it. Before we end, we just want to give people a minute to process that and see where the settings are in case that's something that they might want to do. No pressure. We know that it's not everybody likes to participate outside of a viewing experience. So, but Dani, above and beyond as always, beautiful work. And thank you everyone who's attended. I'm gonna just look one last time. I'm seeing that there's a lot of praise. Oh, wait, we've got a hand raised. Hang on. I'm patching through Ms. Lizzie Walker.
Hi.
Lizzie, would you like to be on video or audio?
Audio is just fine.
Okay,
That
you
works.
are on with Dani.
Hi. First, I mean, I know I said it in the chat, but that was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you, Lizzie.
No problem. I'm an academic librarian. So another, I just wanted to pop in another way, you know, to avoid plagiarism and all of this fun stuff is to talk to your librarian. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
No problem. I think my only question right now, like you talked so much about like Us, and that's one of my absolute favorite movies. Oh my God, I lost my question though.
Take your time.
Yeah, I got nervous. I don't know why.
We can always patch you back in if you need a second to collect yourself. Us.
Oh my God, I lost my question.
What were we talking? We're talking about Us, and it was see if we can help her remember her question.
Oh my God, I feel like an idiot.
No, don't. Do you know how many times this has happened to me where I'm live and about to ask a question, and then my brain goes.
I short-circuited. So
was it about one of the characters or the music from the film or?
Oh my God.
You know what? It will patch you through as soon as you think of it, or don't hesitate.
I'll remember at 2 a.m, guaranteed. I will email you, Dani.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah,
my DMs are.
Don't be sorry.
Open, so.
Okay. Cool.
All right, I'm gonna mute you, but if you think of it in the next few seconds, raise your hand. We'll bring you back. No apologies.
No worries.
All right. Does anybody else? I'm just checking to see if we have any other people that wanted to raise a hand. I apologize. I'm looking at like 5 different screens to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Just a lot of wonderful comments for you. So, okay. So I think then that we will complete this, and please, if you visit us on Discord, I know that our Discord channel is very experimental and we haven't gotten into it much yet. Tomorrow we plan to really delve into it because this weekend has been filled with events, but Dani will absolutely, I'm speaking for Dani, so hopefully Dani's not going to murder me, but I think you'd be open to answering questions there if people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So thank you all for joining us. Please, spread the word about this event if you enjoyed it. And we have 2 more live events tonight. Register in advance. I don't want to say anything except it's going to be fun. Trust me. All right. Take care, everybody. I am going to look awkward as I figure out how to end this properly. Dani, bless you. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, again who attended. I love you so much.
Mwah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.